Good afternoon, everybody. It is 4:00 p.m. today, Monday, May the 15th, 2023. I'd like to call this Finance Committee meeting to order. If you can please ascertain a quorum and call roll, please.
Jessica Tyler. Amanda Galbraith. Present. Jeffrey Morgan.
Present.
Noreen Scott. Gary Tripp.
Present.
Chairperson Tyler, you have a quorum.
Madam. Okay, first item on the agenda tonight is to approve the prioritized agenda. Do I have a
Make a
motion for it? Thank you.
Gary Tripp, I make a motion that we approve the prioritized agenda.
Board Member Jeff Morgan, I second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Motion passes 4-0. Next item on the agenda is public comment. We did not receive any public comment specific to the Finance Committee meeting. So we will move directly into reports. Item A for the fiscal year 24 proposed Rio Rancho Public Schools operational budget. Mr. Baker and
Yes, Madam
Paul,
Chair.
thank
So we want to review, we reviewed a couple weeks ago our operational budget, presented a balanced budget at that time. Fortunately, we did receive our final SEG numbers last Monday, so we did make some changes. I'll go over those, some of those changes, and Heather and David will also go over a number of changes from last fiscal year to this fiscal year, and just give you kind of an overall look at the 23-24 budget. This year seemed to be a pretty good year for us. Our SEG increased by approximately 18%. We were pretty happy with that. So when you look at the kind of the budget overview, you see our SEG is just under $225 million. Other sources of revenue, which David will go over in much more detail on the SEG and other sources, just under $2 million. Our cash carry, and I really don't like that title, but that's what PED uses. Other jurisdiction uses, I think, a better fitting descriptor, which is either a beginning fund balance or ending fund balance. That really is what it is at approximately $17 million for an overall revenue picture of right around $244 million. On the expenditure side, by far our biggest expenditures in salary and benefits for a service-oriented organization, and that's typically what you'll see at $182.5 million. Schools and department operating budgets are a bit over $61 million. You will see in the kind of the red column here, difference between revenue and expenditures is zero. That means we have a balanced budget, so we're very, very happy with that. Some of the mandatory items that are noteworthy that were required by legislature, we just hit the big ones. As you know, the legislative required a 6% salary increase, approximately $8.7 million. Other increases, I won't be going through them one by one, such as medical, ERB, and some other things, which total just a bit over $13.5 million. Some of the other major budget initiatives, which were not required, but were important to the district, capital projects such as the CTE complex. We obviously want to make sure that we have enough put away for those projects in bonds and operational, about $8 million. We have our transportation deficit, our evolved system, and some other things. I think of particularly noteworthy, we are asking for an additional 4% salary increase for office staff this year. I know in some prior meetings, Member Tripp asked us to look at some type of sick leave enhancement or something that we could provide some type of incentive for employees not to use their sick leave, and we're estimating that at approximately 1.6 million. And with that is, I'll go into a little detail on that, is that we had an incentive package where if you only use between 0 and 3 days of sick leave, you could sell back or get an additional 3 days of personal leave, and 2 days if you use between 4 and 6. And so now what we're doing is we're allowing the employee, instead of selling that time at $75 a day, they could sell that time for $300 a day, which gets closer to the daily rate of an employee rather than 75. We think that that will create a pretty good incentive for people not to abuse their sick leave. So we're going to be meeting with the union. I know Mike Chavez and his group they've been meeting with the union, and that program, although if approved by the board, will be a pilot program, and we'll kind of more or less see how that goes. Next thing is an addition to our teaching staff, approximate number 65, approximate cost about 5.7 million. We also we're bringing adding about 8.5 positions to ancillary, and we also have in this column ancillary, I say CARES, Medicaid, and I believe IDEA special funds that we're bringing over into operational. The reason for that is that if we pay for it out of operational this year, the following year it will be picked up in SCG. So it really benefits us to have that expenditure, and to be able to essentially eat that cost the first year and then collect the revenue in the second year. Those are the highlights for the 23-24 budget. And what I will do is I will pass it on to David, and then David will pass it on to Heather, and then we will stand for questions if that works.
Our elementary teachers' planning periods in this district, our secondary teachers have always had it. And because we're taking away the Wednesday afternoons now, because we have to meet the number of total hours instructionally, by doing this, it gives every elementary teacher in our district a planning period. And we've been trying to do this for years. And so it just, to me, it really, it helps in two ways. It gives us more counseling support in the school, which everybody has said we need.
Mm-hmm.
And secondly, it gives us another special area. And you have to have those additional two to be able to create enough time in the schedule to be able to provide those planning periods. So it's for our elementary folks, this is a huge enhancement. This is a wonderful positive thing for them.
Mm.
And I just want to emphasize what Mike said, but be sure you understand, everyone, that with ancillary, the way it works in our state is you have to pay it year one. And then the next year, and from that year on, the state pays it. So that's a one-time expenditure. We will not have it the next year. And so we talked about, that having some funds that we may need to kind of move. This is a great thing because it's not recurring. And and the other thing that is really directly related to that is, I'm sure you are aware, because I know the School Boards Association has talked a lot about, we're going to have to increase getting our special ed students identified earlier, faster than we've been doing it. And we have to increase it, I believe, Jay, about 100% efficiency by next year. So it's not like a small amount. And so these ancillary are needed most of them are needed to be able to identify those students in a more timely manner. And so both of those, they're both driven by state requirements, but both of them will be a good thing for our school districts. So sometimes we get mandates and we say, we have to do this. In this case, we're really thrilled to be able to do this because it will help our schools significantly.
Thank you.
Okay. This is David Vigil. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board, Dr. Cleveland. We're going to go over, in addition to the 224 million in SEG that Mr. Baker just reported on, we're going to go on some of the other sources of operational revenue that total just shy of $2 million. It should go pretty quickly, but we have in column G on your spreadsheet here. First line here is $50,000 that we get in interest income on our bank accounts. We have collect about 50,000 in education fees, or 70,000 between education fees, about 100,000 in facility use agreements, and approximately 300,000 in payments in lieu of taxes. We collect 125,000 from the ROTC and the United Way. And then others down here include $10,000 in insurance recoveries, $30,000 in refunds of prior year expenses. And the big one here is indirect costs of federal flow-through grants. So $672,000, which would be the indirect costs mostly associated with the CARES funds, IDB, Title I, and then food services as well. So, and the last one here is our E-rate program. That's the program that the federal government gives us on internet and other telecommunications equipment, $627,000. So all totaled, in addition to what we get in the SEG, totals around $1.9 million, just shy of $2 million. The other piece that I was going to go over here is just a little summary on the SEG, just so you all and the public are aware of where that comes from. But the SEG, it stands for State Equalization Guarantee. It is a complex formula that funds district and public school charter operations. When we talk about the calculation, I'm going to present the calculation, the nuts and bolts in a very simplified manner in just a second. But just so that you're aware of the definitions of some of the terminology that we're going to use, MEM stands for membership or enrollment. Program units is the product of membership multiplied by a cost factor. These cost factors, they are a weighted unit of measure used to determine a cost for a program. The unit value is assigned by the PD, and that is the dollar value associated with each program unit. And then again, the SEG in simplified form is all of your total program units multiplied by the unit value, and that equals the SEG. So Mike Baker likes to talk in buckets. So if you think of the SEG in terms of buckets, this is your SEG formula. So you take all of your MEM, all of your enrollment, you multiply that by all of the different cost factors that are in the SEG. When you multiply the MEM times those cost factors, you get program units. So essentially all of the students in the school are converted into program units. Those program units, when they're totaled, are multiplied by the unit value. The unit value is assigned by the PED and the legislature, and the result is the SEG. So that's the funding formula in a nutshell. It's very complex, and there's a lot more to it, but this kind of gives a visual picture of what that looks like. So program units are generated primarily through enrollment. The funding factors include general ed enrollment, special ed enrollment, ancillary services, specialized programs to include bilingual, elementary fine arts, elementary PE, at-risk, and so forth. Participation in the following programs do not generate program units through the SEG. So if students participate in athletics, counseling or social work, nursing, medical occurrences, truancy, or discipline issues, those kinds of activities are not funded or they don't generate program units that the SEG is derived from. So We still pay for those kinds of things, most of those things out of the SEG, but participation in those activities does not generate program units, just so that you are all aware. And this kind of shows the big pie of what we're talking about here. So the SEG makes up about 80%. And let me remind you that this is from 2022, 2023. So this is from the current school year. We don't have all of the numbers yet for some of these other revenue sources. So I was just providing a graphical representation, generally speaking, of what the SEG is in relation to other funding sources. So basically for Rio Rancho, the SEG covers about 80% of total funding here. And then all of these other funding sources to include federal grants, which is the darker blue piece of the pie, food services, non-instructional support, local grants, transportation distribution. That kind of makes up all of the different funding sources that fund the district. There were a couple of additions or changes to the state equalization funding factor this year. The unit value increased by 13%, and House Bill 130 increased the cost factors in the SEG formula for the elementary fine arts and for the at-risk factors. And I just put a side-by-side comparison of what those, what the differences mean here. So not only is it the cost factor that drive up the difference in the amount of revenue collected, but it's also determined by membership and that cost factor and the new unit value as well. So there's three different levers there that you'll see why the difference in the funding is. But for elementary fine arts, that is an increase of $571,000. And for the at-risk factor, that's a total increase of $1.8 million. So generally speaking, the legislature doesn't necessarily make changes every year to the SEG funding formula. In fact, for several years, it remained constant. For the past 3 years or so, they've been adding factors and changing factors and that kind of stuff. So I just wanted to give you some highlights there. That was it in terms of the revenue piece. And then we will turn it over to Heather, and let me get your documents here.
Big enough? Okay. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the board, Dr. Cleveland. And this afternoon, I'm going to be just giving you a snapshot of the salaries and benefits that total approximately $182 million of our overall budget. These are just main salaries for positions. We do also have additional compensation that is around $5 to $7 million, and those cover stipends and other sources of compensation to our employees. This first chart is basically a snapshot of our salaries and benefits by function. And our function is an element of our chart of accounts, and it basically represents a major program or activity that the district accomplishes. So on here, there are 8 different programs. As you can see, there's the 1000 program, which is our direct instructional, and that covers all of our teachers and EAs. That's 65%. We have in the 2100 program, that's support services for students, and that's 10%, and that covers all of our social workers, counselors, and all of our ancillary staff, such as our speech pathologists and our OTs and PTs, psychologists. So between the two of those, that represents about 75% of direct instruction or direct support to our students. We also have other funds other than operational that pay quite a bit, that pay a large amount of salaries and benefits for teachers, and ancillary staff, and I'll go over that in a minute, as well as we have contractors that also provide the teacher and EA and ancillary staff. So actually, if you add all of the other funds as well as the contract services, we're actually closer to 80% of direct instruction and direct support to our students. The 2200 program is support services for instruction, and that is our librarians and our library EAs. The 2300 is support services for general administration. That's at 3%. That's all of our district office departments, with the exception of finance, HR, IT, and RADA, and facilities and security. The 2400 function is 7% of our salaries and benefits, and that is school administration. That's our principals, assistant principals, secretaries, bookkeepers, admin assistants, the clerical at the schools. The 2500 is support services, central services, and that is 5% of our operational salaries and benefits, and that is for our district office, finance departments, HR, IT, and RADA. 2600 function is support services for operation and maintenance. That's 7%, and that covers our facility departments, so our custodians and our maintenance, as well as our security department. And then the 2700 function is for transportation. That's 2%, and that is basically our shortfall for our transportation funding, and that covers a lot of our drivers and assistants on the buses. So that's a snapshot of basically our functions. And where's the other one? Oh, okay. So I mentioned earlier that we have other funding besides operational, and David mentioned that as well. And we do use a lot of those funds to pay for salary and benefits. So I'll just go through a few of those. Medicaid is a large source of funding for us, and that basically this is for our current fiscal year, because we don't yet have award letters for some of these. So this is kind of a snapshot of what we received this year. But Medicaid is we received $3.8 million, and it pays, well, we actually received more, but we use $3.8 million of it to pay for all the salaries and benefits of the district's nurses and health EAs, and a percentage of the district office employees that manage the Medicaid program. We have Title I funding that pays for approximately $1.8 million of general ed teachers at title schools. We have IDEA B funding, which pays for approximately $3.1 million of the salaries of special ed teachers and special ed EAs. We have our pre-K grant, which pays for approximately $1.5 million of the salaries and benefits of preschool teachers and EAs at Shining Stars Preschool. We have the state funding for the transportation fund. $4.6 million is how much we received, approximately $2.5 million of which is moved to operational due to the funding shortfall. And that pays for the salaries and benefits of the transportation department, including administrative, clerical, maintenance, drivers, and assistants. This year we had CARES 3, which we used $1.5 million to pay for the salaries and benefits of special ed teachers. Those salaries and benefits are in the operational budget next year. We had 24346, which is CARES IDEA B, $650,000. That was to pay for contracted special ed teachers and EAs, and we have moved those back to operational for next year because that grant does expire in September. And then we had some CTE grants for $420,000 that paid the salaries and benefits of 4 CTE employees. And then we have our SAFE program, pays for $1.2 million of the employees working the SAFE before and after school program. This is mostly a self-funded program by charging fees to the families of the students. And then we have our EMDC program, which is our employee daycare, $275,000, and that is basically self-funded through charging fees to the employees. Does anybody have any questions?
I do, please.
Sure.
So on the transportation budget, the way that's worded makes it seem like we were allocated 4.6 million and then we moved 2.5 of that to operational, because it's saying of which. but
Yeah,
that's-
sorry.
that's not
Our
correct.
expenses are 4.6 million. We moved approximately 2.5 million over to operational. 4.6 million of salaries and benefits, of which 2.5 million were moved to operational due to the shortfall.
Okay, so meaning that we would have needed approximately 7.1 million to totally fund?
We had about a $2.5 million shortfall, and I
Right.
believe our funding, yes, for this last year was 3.2 million, so about 6 million.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the way that one's worded is very
Okay,
confusing to me,
yeah, okay.
but,
So, yeah, we received 3.2 million of funding for transportation in fiscal year 23, and we had a shortfall of 2.5 million. So if you add the 3.2 plus the 2.5, that's our total. That's a $6 million budget, 4.6 million of which is salary and benefits.
okay. Yeah, because the way this is portrayed makes it seem like that's the amount of funding that we're receiving.
Right.
And so to me, that should say 3.2 or whatever it is that we're getting from the state for that funding.
Okay, gotcha. I was just showing on here the salaries and benefit costs.
Right.
Yes. Okay.
Taylor, I have a question on benefits.
Mm-hmm.
The number of dollars that an MCO give that is. That an MCO is moving up on, does it cover every group of employees in the district? In other words.
Are you talking about the new tiers?
Mhm.
No, I believe it starts at 50,000, correct? And they pay, I think, 80% of employees making 50,000 or less. And then I believe it goes up to 75% for employees making 60,000 or less. Is that correct? Or am I saying that right? 70%, sorry, 70% for employees making 60,000 or less. And then everybody over 60,000 who makes over 60,000, they are paying 60%, which is how much they pay now.
So they may not have all their benefits covered, so that may be coming out of their paycheck, right?
Mhm.
So our level 3 teachers.
Right, level 3 teachers will see the same percentage as they see now. They didn't get an additional benefit this year.
Okay. It's just a worrisome thing about level 3 teachers. You know, there are every teacher's critical, but they're critical and not all their benefits are being covered.
Right.
So,
The governor has expressed a desire. She said that she plans to go back next session and ask for 80% for everyone. And we'll see whether that happens, but that's certainly not going to be the reality this year. They asked for 100%, as you recall. There was a concern about two things. One, that many people would get off other benefits plans that they were on, which would add to the burden of the state employee benefit pool. And so really the discussion was moving it to 80% for all, but they ran out of time before they were able to do that. And that was the compromise for this year. But who knows what will happen next year, but the governor's plan is to go back and ask for 80% of all school employees. And again, emphasizing only the employee, not the family.
is it too late or is it possible to look at what it would cost us to cover that level 3 teacher? I mean, if we took it out of our cash carryover, hopefully it's a one-time cost for the level 3.
I mean, if you want, we could rework the budget, but that, we were talking about buckets, and essentially,
We're talking about buckets of money. So that cash carry is actually beginning fund balance. And so we take the beginning fund balance, we take other sources of revenue, and we take our SEG. Those are the three large buckets, and we put them into one big bucket. And then when all that funding is in one big bucket, it gets disseminated throughout the entire district. So that beginning fund balance essentially has already been budgeted. It's already baked into the budget. So we don't have any extra funding. But what we could do, I think, is we could maybe run some numbers to get an idea of what that would cost.
Get an idea.
'Cause I think the numbers would be pretty large.
It would be for level 2 teachers as well, though, right? Because the level 2 teachers that start at 60,000 aren't getting any additional benefit this year. So it'd
Right.
be level 2 and level 3.
And I'll just clarify one more thing, that NIPSIA increased their premium rates by 7.2%, 7.25%. Now, the legislature also increased salaries by 6%. That doesn't mean that the amount of the premium increase exceeds the amount of the raise that that each individual employee gets. So if you take the salary and increase that by 6%, but you increase the employee's premium by 7.2%, that's a much smaller number. So just to clarify, not necessarily seeing less take-home pay, it should be covered by the raise. If that clarifies anything.
Yeah, I just was looking at budgets, and I just know I was married to a level 3 teacher that had a take-home pay 5 years in a row less, and it's not a good feeling for teachers out there. You know what I mean, in those categories. So that's why, if we could just look at it, I
I
mean,
think we can take a look and
Yeah.
confirm, we can make sure that they're not taking home less
right.
as a result of the NIPSIA
Thank you. Yep.
increase.
But the other side of that, and I understand what you're saying is, and we tell our teachers you're getting a 6% raise and you're really not. And so that's,
Yeah.
and so that's what's also hard.
Mhm.
And I think that was not the intent of the administration. And
Right.
honestly, I don't even think it was the intent of the legislature. I think
I
they
don't
just
think
ran
so.
out of time. So one of the things we can definitely do, the board can definitely do, is get behind our legislators next session and really support that 80% being paid for all
Yeah.
employees. It would be a very good incentive in terms of recruitment, and it would be a real factor in terms of retention. And so, I'm hopeful that what we hear is that our projections for revenue next year are going to be stronger than they were this year. And so it would be good, maybe our best approach is legislatively to really get behind that and get that up to 80% for all employees. But it is, we don't want people having less take-home pay, but it's also discouraging to be told you have a 6% raise and you don't see a 6% raise after you pay your increased medical premiums. That also being said, though, that's true in the world in general.
Yeah.
It's not just in public schools, it's happening in businesses, it's happening other places. Cost of healthcare is just going through the roof. So we are not alone at all in that. And I think the other issue related to our healthcare, I've mentioned it before, but I hope we can work with our delegation, is looking at the what's in that benefits package. And one of the things that I think is really problematic, and I think we've got to deal with it, and actually had that conversation just a few days ago with the secretary, is that because Albuquerque runs its own pool and has been able to keep a better benefits package than NIPSIA has offered, we've seen a loss of people across the river because the benefits package is better.
Better for them.
And so we are going to need to improve the overall NIPSIA benefits package. And, it's true with all of the surrounding districts, whether it's Rio Rancho, Bernalillo, Los Lunas, Moriarty, Edgewood, are all facing that challenge of having a benefits package that's a little less attractive. And so it raises the question, and that's something that superintendents are having a conversation with, is there a way we can improve the benefits package? And is it the best we can offer? And I do know one of the things they're looking at, and I don't know if it will go that way. I was told there's going to be very serious consideration about consolidating some of the packages across the state in hopes of getting better premiums,
That would be good.
in hopes of lowering premiums and getting better benefits. And when you ask the folks in Santa Fe, what's the timeline for that? They said probably 2 to 3 years before they are considering maybe pooling some of the others. And, I don't know whether that'll be the answer or not, but that's certainly on the horizon as being seriously considered. And I do know one state that did that, and they were very effective in lowering their premiums. And they also saw a much better benefits package. And they threw their legislators in on the same package. And so there was a lot of interest in what it was going to look like. So that's a possibility for the future. We may see a completely different structure for benefits in our state.
Thank
Still
you.
ready for questions?
Yeah, go ahead,
Yeah,
Jeff.
real quick, Mike, you and David said that we got 18% increase on the SEG, right? But then the unit value was only 13% increase. What's the difference?
So I should have mentioned that in addition to the cost factors for at-risk and for FAEA, House Bill 130 also created an out-of-school time program unit, which is a new cost factor in the SEG. And because we have already met, it's essentially what it was. It was a replacement for the extended learning time program.
Mhm.
And so they did away with extended learning time, but brought in this new funding factor because we have already met our calendar requirement to add up to 10 days onto the school calendar, so we're up for 190 days. So there's an additional factor for us for every 8 hours of time offered to our students. And so we built into our school calendar some extra summertime, and that resulted in about $9.7 million in additional SEG. And so that's the discrepancy between the 13% in the unit value and the 18% in SEG. We got additional units for this out-of-school time program.
Okay. All right. And my other question was, Mike, you were at some point in time going to get back to us and explain the sick leave piece.
Yeah, so that, with the sick leave, the conversion is what we're doing is, or I should say what we're proposing is that if an employee takes between 0 and 3 days, or only takes 0 to 3 days in sick leave, that the employee will be allowed to take 3 days of their current sick leave and to transfer that into essentially annual leave or personal leave. And then they will be, if they want, actually, what they can do is they can sell that back to the district at $300 a day versus $75 a day. So the incentive is that if an employee essentially doesn't use sick leave or very little sick leave, there will be a cash incentive for them then to take a little bit of their sick leave and to sell it back to the district. In other words, just kind of get a little extra check. And if they use between 4 and 6 days instead of 3 days, they would get 2 days. But again, that they could sell that 2 days of sick leave back to the district, and again, get an additional check. And so the idea is really twofold. One, it's really to reward those employees that don't use sick leave or use very little sick leave. And it's also used to incentivize people not to abuse their sick leave. And so we are looking at maybe creating this pilot program. A union would have to, approve it, and then it would come to the school board to approve that contract. But that is the idea on sick leave.
And so you have a question. And so this was applicable to all employees?
All employees.
Okay, because I thought when we first, correct me if I'm wrong, I thought when we first talked about this, the concern was employees that was getting ready to leave, had racked up quite a few sick leave time and they were like taking multiple days off at the end of the year. I thought the idea was to kind of stop some of that. So we're now like opening this up to everybody, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Well, we currently have a program now which is similar in nature. But instead of selling it at $75
Right.
a day, it would be $300
Right.
a day. So we think that that is going to incentivize the, the people or the employees to not use their sick leave, and then this way we would have to call in a substitute.
Okay.
Currently, what they could do, what they could do is they could take 3 days of sick leave now, and they could convert that to personal leave, and then they take that time off. The problem with that is that if they're in a school setting, we would have to get a substitute. So instead of using that time, we're saying you can sell that time. And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to reduce the amount of sick time used in the school. And really, there's two problems. One is trying to find a substitute, typically trying to find a substitute at the last minute. Secondly, in the classroom, as you all know, when you have a substitute in class, there's not that learning that is going on with that continuous teacher. So that kind of is the concept. And if we do this, we would measure it and see what the end result would be.
Okay. Thank you.
And so what's the most amount that you could make? It would be 1,500, a check at the end of the year?
It would be possible if you had currently 2 days, if you currently had 2 days.
And you added 3
personal
more.
leave, and then you added 3, it would be 5 days at 300, a gross amount.
I don't think 1,500 is a small amount. I think it could really motivate people. We don't want people who are there that are sick, so that's not the intent. And that's why it's not 0. And the other, we did look, board member Tripp, at something at the end. But one of the challenges with that is it's a long time perspective for some folks way out there. When you're young, you don't think you're ever going to get out there. When you get older, it just goes like that, So the other, though, is some districts who did at the end of career found themselves with huge liabilities, financial liabilities, changing demographics, changing enrollments. It's really hard to project the future out there. And so looking at it year by year makes it more cost effective. We can manage those costs a little better as opposed to pushing it to the very end. And the other is if you have a bad year, and you have a family serious illness or whatever, but you're in the running the next year. So it's not like it's a forever kind of thing, year by year. So I looked at different things, but this seems to be enough of an incentive that it means something. It's short enough time that people can see. It's not instant gratification, but pretty close to it, And I mean, it's an opportunity to see if this would work, but it's, we've talked about, and the board's talked about incentives as well as six.
Right.
But the other end of that, we want it to be positive. We want to encourage people to do the right thing. On the other hand, we are going to have to get tighter, period. And really look at some of the attendance issues we have with staff as well as students. And so it'll have to go both ways. It'll have to be monitoring attendance a little better than we have. But also providing a really good incentive for people to not use that sick leave frivolously.
Well, I think there's 2 more positive things.
Mhm.
If it's all staff, then kids are used to seeing that secretary, that's like their second mom, or those people being at school to get that incentive is important. But also the people here, people at the schools are relying on them for purchase requests. They're relying on them for this. They're relying on them for that. And when everybody's at work more often, it just makes everything flow better for children. So I do like it. I mean, I think it does a lot of positive things. Yeah.
But you were correct, Jeff. We had asked for both.
Yeah.
Both ways, looking at retention during the year, decreasing sick time, and then also an incentive for when they were retiring. So you weren't wrong with that, Jeff. But yeah, I like that this is a good pilot program to try. Amanda, did you have any questions?
Well, just one other, again, but I just really emphasize, we did look into some of those districts that had pushed it to the end. And when they had had declining enrollments or they had had, other kinds of variables that they were not in control of, some districts ended up with huge financial liabilities. So that would be something the board would have to at least take into consideration.
I had
But
one.
we did look at it.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Cleveland. I did have one other question. What were our program units this year compared to last year? I know that we've said that our enrollment numbers have been pretty steady, but did we have the same or close to the same number of, I hate calling our kids units, but MEMS? Do we have the same amount of members this year?
I can take a look real quick if you're willing to wait a couple of minutes, because I have it on fingertips.
Sure.
Yeah.
I have a question, but it could be, well, he does that for a future meeting.
Okay.
Last year, I think we looked also at the class averages at the elementary, middle school, and high school. So if that could come back at some point to see how we're compared this year from last year and
Yeah, for the
what
teacher
we're projecting
allocations.
for next year,
Yeah.
you know. We don't need it now, but
What I mentioned earlier, of the two elementary positions, one is counselor, but that counselor will be working in classes with kids, teaching the counseling curriculum and supporting that, and that will help with the rotations. The other, I believe, is the STEAM labs. And so that also will help our teachers by having someone really dedicated, excited about that lab. And Janice Schnauz's been working on some purchasing some things, getting some things ready for the STEAM lab, and it's looking really exciting. I think it's going to be a huge asset to our elementary schools. Well, he's working on that. One of the things we are seeing, one of the areas we are seeing program units increase is special education. But with that comes incredible costs. So that is one of the areas I know for sure we have seen some significant increases in program units.
Okay, so last year we had 33,384 total program units. Or I should say this year, we have 33,384. Next year, we generated 34,470 units. That's an increase of 1,086 units.
Thank you, David.
How many of those are special ed?
Well, thank you guys for your hard work. I know that you guys were waiting till the last minute to get the final figures from Santa Fe, so we appreciate your preparation and diligence in getting everything prepared in a timely fashion for us today. Any other questions from any of the board members?
Good, thank you.
I have a question, and I didn't understand Dr. Cleveland at the beginning, and it was, I know we have 2 more additional people going in at the elementary school, but then there was an increase in the ancillary. And I took it as the same, but that's not the same. We have an increase in ancillary because of special education needs, right? Okay.
And those are psychologists and diagnosticians. Jerry, what else?
SLPs, social workers, and OT, and the teacher of visual impairment.
Thank you.
And they serve different schools. As you know, most of you know, they're in different schools. Some are centralized, but most are located out in the building, so they provide those extra services. As I said, the way New Mexico does, it's really interesting. I've never seen anywhere else, is the first year the district has to pay because they want to be sure you've got skin in the game and you're not inflating your request. But then after that, the state reimburses you for those costs. In the past, we've not been able to increase it. We just had the money. Even though we knew the next year we would get paid for it. There just wasn't enough. So this year we have some extra. It's wonderful to be able to get that out. But more importantly, we've had changes in the requirements, such as the identification timeline for special education. And, it's a really, sometimes we get things and we say, gosh, this is just not necessarily a good thing, but this is a really good thing to get children identified and placed, serviced much earlier. And I know that some of you as board members have had concerns, complaints from parents about how long the process was taking. We just didn't have the personnel. And that was exacerbated by COVID. It was hard to get a hold of people. It was hard to talk to people. It's hard to get people in. But they have worked to have a set number of evals, for example, per staff member. Really worked hard to not ask for more than what we need, but what's being asked for, we truly need in order to meet that requirement. And of course, we would never go there. I mean, we absolutely know we wouldn't go there. But if you don't get to that point, then the district is in danger of losing its special education funding. And so it's there's a lot of teeth behind, you've got to get this done. But it's the right thing. So it's not like we're arguing about not having to do it. It's the right thing to do.
Gary, you have one more question?
I did. I have one more, and I'm sorry. I was looking at my notes. And it's the educational assistants that are hard to find in the hard to find special education classrooms. And I know that the state didn't differentiate when they gave the raises. So I didn't know if we were in a need.
But we do.
We do. And we
Not
did
like
do that.
Michelle,
Okay.
but we
All right.
do.
Okay.
Yeah,
Good.
Madam Chair, Member Tripp. Yeah, so what we did was we took essentially 3 tiers. So the first tier, we went with the base rate as the legislature dictated at 25,000 a year. The second tier, we're calling essentially acute care, critical care, EAs. They're at 27,500. And then the third tier is social communication or behavior support at 30,000, but the 30,000 will also be required to receive training after hours, which will require overtime.
Thank you. Hopefully we get them, those kids, their needs.
Thank you, Mike. Okay, with that, we'll move on to item number 3, business, for consideration of approval of the unapproved 4/24/2023 Finance Committee meeting minutes. Any discussion on those?
Sport Member Jeff Morgan, I make a recommendation that we approve the unapproved 4/24/2023 Finance Committee meeting minutes.
Board Member Tripp, I'll second it.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries 4-0. And with that, we move on to advanced planning. Our next Finance Committee meeting is scheduled for Monday, August the 14th at 4:00 p.m. in the Rio Rancho Public Schools Training Center. Any questions on that? So yeah, it seems like a long ways away, but I know it'll come quickly with the summer. And with that, we will go ahead and adjourn today's Finance Committee meeting, and it is 4:53. Thank you.
Within the budget also, Gary, we have increased the EA salaries